All right, welcome back to CMS-Connected here at the Hotel Marlowe. We're on location at the Intranet Reloaded 2015 Boston event. I'm Butch Stearns of the Pulse Network, Scott Lewer of Digital Clarity Group. Having a good time here.
We are having a good time. It's a great crowd here.
We're about to have a better time.
Is that right?
Because we're going to have three distinguished panelists, and we're starting off with the showstopper.
I know, it's going to be hard for the other two to live up to the first
Well,
one,
that's why we put her first. Her name is Celine Schillinger from Sanofi Pasteur. Celine, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm very glad
Yes,
to be
let's
here.
welcome Celine
Yes,
to the show.
please.
So Celine, tell us a little bit about you and Sanofi Pasteur and what you're passionate about as it comes to this subject that we're about to talk about.
All right, so if you ask me who I am, I'm a compulsive community builder. If you ask a few corporate dinosaurs that I know, they would say I'm a pain in the neck because I'm a disruptor, but I do that for the benefit of the company, and we have a mission that is awesome. It's to actually protect lives thanks to vaccination. So that's a great purpose, and I'm passionate about that. How do we engage with our patients, with people who need vaccinations, and how do we engage with our employees? I'm living this passion and making change happen. That's what I do.
Great.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
So to set up my first question, I said something at the top of the show that I didn't really get to clarify on, so I want to use that as the context for the first question to you. I mentioned that I said intranet sometimes have a bad name and have a bad rap, and I don't mean that they necessarily do, but what I mean is kind of historically they feel like to me that they've been a hammer looking for a nail in many cases, right? Help me understand kind of now, how do you look at these kind of, are people getting the idea of what you're trying to do here, where you talk about kind of bringing people together in this compulsive community builder?
It's a little bit difficult to make it lively when everything is so controlled. So the intranet is typically something that comes from the top, that is very, it's a manicured type of communication where people have little freedom to speak and to connect, and so I would say it's not the best engagement tool as of today, but we can change that certainly, and we do that by connecting change agents and corporate rebels. Do you know what corporate rebels are?
No, I would love to hear what a corporate rebel is. Sounds like something I'd love to do.
Where do you guys meet? Is it like a once-a-month meeting or something?
Oh, we meet all over the place on the internet.
We're going to get an invite.
Internet everywhere. The corporate rebels is a notion that I really like. Corporate rebels love their companies, and they want them to succeed, but they want to reboot their corporate and organizational culture and install a 21st century digital native version to put, to make change grow from deep within the organization, to build on the emergence of change. So that's what we do, and I think it's a great service that we make for our organizations, in complement with some clever initiatives that come from the top. I don't say they don't exist, but you really cannot rely on top-down only.
So, Celine, when we're talking about the subject of this edition of CMS Connected, the process of transforming your social intranet, are there people that still don't get it? Or, to Scott's point, is it a bad word? Is it, when you add social into this, that was supposed to be the nail that the hammer was always looking for, right?
True. It's true that some people don't seem to get it still, but I'm an optimistic, and I think it changes. When I joined this company 14 years ago, I remember a very senior executive who had his emails printed so they could read them on paper and responded on paper, and then he had his admin type the response. So that, it was not prehistory, it was only 14 years ago. And of course I know this person who's still in the company now types his emails and read them on the screen. So it does happen, sometimes slower for some people, but I'm confident it happens one conversation at a time and for various reasons. So I think we will manage it. We just have to build change and make it attractive and interesting and inspiring enough.
So that sounds, the way that you contextualize that, that sounds fairly difficult then to me for an organization like IT to be the driving force behind adoption. Then is that the case? What's your thought on that? Can IT be the driving force behind adoption?
Well,
and if not, who is?
I would love IT to be the driving force because they're aware of so many cool tools and possibilities, and they're passionate about this, and they could play this role. Unfortunately, many of them are still too close to the tools, actually. And social adoption is not at all a tool matter. It is a culture matter. So if we make it relevant and interesting and inspiring, but sticking to the business needs, that is where transformation happens. It doesn't happen with tools at all. Plus, I have great friends in IT, but some others are really obsessed with security and barriers and making it, and keeping their job, so making it complicated for end users so that they still have a job and they're needed. So this keeping intermediaries, keeping experts in the landscape instead of making open and easy for end users to do things, to play with the tools themselves, like Facebook, But I think there's also an evolution in IT.
So one more quick question before we bring in our next guest, Lou Dubois from NBC Universal. How do we empower people or embark people into social collaboration, if you will?
Social collaboration is something that happens because you see it's interesting, or because you have a proof that it works, or not everybody is convinced by the same things. I believe a lot in peer-to-peer communication and engagement. And I'm convinced that it doesn't come from the top. It's not because I'm asked to adopt this tool, but because a company is putting it, making it available, that I'm going to use it. But if I can see my colleague, my friend, my peer using it and making great progress with that, maybe I can come on board.
All right, let's bring up Lou Dubois from NBC Universal. Celine Schillinger, everybody. How about a nice round of applause for her? You are watching CMS Connected here from the Intranet Reloaded event 2015 from the Hotel Marlowe in Cambridge. I'm Butch Stearns. This is Scott Lewer, your co-hosts of CMS Connected. We bring in Lou Dubois, who is the Executive Director of Digital Content at NBC Universal. Welcome, Lou.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great to have you here.
It's good to be here.
What do you do as the Executive Director of Digital Content at NBC Universal?
$1 million question. So NBC Universal, small little company, you may have heard of it. Entertainment and media. We have one thing that is really interesting about our company is we've got over 100 different businesses that kind of make up our portfolio. So, pardon me. Things as diverse as Fandango to Universal Studios, theme parks to Universal Pictures. I'm good. Thank you, though. Very kind of you. To Universal Studios, pictures to news and all these different things that you see. So the portfolio is really vast. And kind of our group, so we oversee internal and external communication. My role is to oversee the digital tools and technologies that we're using to really improve those communications.
Great. Well, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Well, Lou, while you have a French last name, it's very disappointing that you don't have a French accent as our first guest does. So unfortunately, you're not only not as good looking, but now you've got to have as much to say, and you need to figure out a way to do it with an accent.
Scott,
I disagree.
We all fall short in Celine's shadow, so.
We do.
Okay.
I'm glad you don't have an accent, because I hate it when I co-host with somebody
Do you
with
have a
an
question
accent.
anywhere in here for Lou?
I do have a question. Okay, here we go, Lou. What's my question to you? So how do we then, so picking up on, you heard some of Celine's comments earlier, how do we begin this process, really, of transforming from kind of the way that I set it up, a mere intranet, into this notion of a social tool in a collaboration environment?
Sure. So I think the thing that we try to do is to identify what's working and what's not. I think we've heard a lot today about metrics and data, and I think that really any conversation about reloading or revitalizing any kind of internet service has to start with what you're doing now. We look at the way that our employees are communicating and the way that our employee base kind of works. And you think about the rate of change that's happened in the past 5 years, right? Last week we just celebrated 5 years of the iPad being created. And so, these things happen so quickly that you need to be willing to adopt. So it's kind of identifying what works now and then sort of getting that data to inform what is going to work 1 year down the road, 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road. So for us, it's really important to kind of instill a change that is going to let people, not only do something that's working for them now, but also think about how it's going to impact their future. I think we've also heard a lot about mobile sort of ideas today and kind of using mobile phones. This is the future for us, especially when it comes to internal communications and working with employees, is how are you communicating with them on mobile devices? And I think for us, it's a particular challenge because a lot of our employees are not necessarily at a desk all day.
So speak directly to our audience, our viewing audience, and the people in this room about getting buy-in from the top.
Sure.
What are the check boxes? You just talked about you have to do an assessment, an audit, if you will, about what's in place. What are they? What are the check boxes? Make these people nod their heads and go, yeah,
sure.
I've been there.
Yeah. So I think that, the check boxes for us from an executive buy-in perspective is, it's what is the actual usage number on the intranet site per se? What are the usage numbers on the mobile app that we've created? And then looking at it from there, when you talk about executive buy-in, I think we heard this earlier today, but getting the executive buy-in is really the key. I think that if you don't have people at the top really pushing these ideas, there is no incentive for those next level of managers and frontline employees to then use it. So I love the example of getting CEOs and executives to blog and to talk on video. I think it's often harder for a lot of companies to do that, but I think it's a great forward-looking opportunity for a lot of businesses to really engage their employees, because that's really the opportunity here.
Great.
I'd love to follow. I'm going to set you up with another question, but I think when we come to all of us, I'd love to go into something that you just talked about there, but I'll write it down for later. So how though do organizations who are listening to your advice here now, how should they ensure that all their employees kind of have access? One of the big things is this whole idea of shared knowledge, right? That not only should you be able to capture knowledge within your organization before folks leave out the door, be able to kind of get that, but then also providing that and making that accessible to other employees. So how do you go about doing something like that?
So I talked a little bit at the beginning about the scale of our organization, and I think that this is actually one of the really unique challenges we've got. So we've got people who are seasonal employees that work in theme parks, who are the ones, kind of putting you on rides, serving you food, sweeping up the streets at Universal Studios. We've got people who are making movies, people who are kind of on contract basis for 6-month runs, for 4-month runs. And then we've got a lot of people in different corporate functions, both in news and entertainment, cable. And so we're trying to appeal to this really diverse audience base that there is no one-size-fits-all opportunity for. So I think that you really need to identify, and what we've tried to do is identify those different use cases. I love the idea of segmenting out your audiences and figuring out who the different users are and what their kind of use cases are, and then you can create something for that particular user base. So I think for us that's really the key as we look at getting adoption across the different groups, is actually getting the different groups kind of identified and recognized first, and then creating for them.
So your new movie is Rambo 6. We're going to throw to a clip from it.
Yes.
Oh, I took
Which
that Jimmy
clip
Fallon
did you
thing
use?
A little too far. Round of applause for our guest, Lou Dubois. Let's bring Andrew up. You guys could slide over. Andrew Misheloff is the Global Enterprise Social Business Strategist at Groupon. Andrew has been here for the conference all this time. Please welcome Andrew Misheloff. He already said to us, Gary, we spoke for you. He already said to us, do you mind if I wear my Flyers hat? And as a Bruins fan, I said, well, they're not in the playoffs anyway. So. But then again, the Bruins might be out of the playoffs in a couple of days, too. We won't talk about the Maple Leafs. Anyway. Andrew, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Same question I asked the two of you. What do you do at Groupon, and what are you passionate about?
What I do at Groupon is I achieve the impossible. I was hired into a 2-year-old 6-foot giant that was growing exponentially, and we went from a couple of countries to 48 countries very, very rapidly. A lot of it through inorganic growth, so a lot of acquisitions. And the goal for me was to come in and figure out how to make sense of all this, how to bring everyone onto a single platform for communication, collaboration, connection with your coworkers around the globe.
So again, before Scott goes at Andrew, and we ask some more questions. If you have questions in the audience, we're going to go to you as soon as we're done with Andrew and take any questions. Please get Elise's attention, and she'll come over to you and stand up and say your name, your company, and ask your question if you have one. Go ahead, Scott.
Okay, great. So that's really interesting, and I think I've changed my question now hearing your setup, which is that,
Please.
coming into a 2-year-old company, I'd imagine, where Celine set us up talking about culture being so important here, and that I think the culture is more important than the tools are in sort of adopting these sorts of things. Given that you were at the infancy of the culture creation process, I think, for your organization, was it easier to kind of launch an enterprise social business platform for you because you had this kind of more moldable, more malleable, at least, clay, do you feel like? And I guess what advice would you give to others who are trying to do that, who might not, by the way, have that advantage?
Sure. I think it goes both ways. I mean, the fact that I'm able to come into an organization that does not have a 20-year-old culture or a 100-year-old culture in some cases made my job a little bit easier, that I could help to create that culture through the technology. But at the same time, I'm dealing with a generation of millennials, of 20-something, that grew up with Facebook, that grew up with these other social tools, that if I didn't come out with a rock-solid platform from day one, I'm not going to get a second chance to earn their respect and earn their, to win these folks over.
Yeah.
So I had to come out with something that was ready to hit the ground running, was going to address the key needs of the organization, and was going to be scalable on a global level.
So while you had the opportunity to sort of establish a culture, talk about some of the challenges you had with doing that, but also doing it, trying to drive change management when you have such a globally distributed workforce. I mean, you mentioned millennials, but you got them all over the world.
Right, that's correct. So one of the first things that I did at Groupon was to create surveys that were going to go out to the user population, go out to key stakeholders within the organization. I needed to learn about Groupon. I needed to learn about what were the key pain points of the organization that this platform could address. I was also coming into this as the sole owner of this platform, so a one-man operation working to create change within a global organization that was in 48 countries at the time, 12,000 users. So not an easy task. I wasn't going to try and boil the ocean. I couldn't. I'm one person. So I was able to identify 3 core use cases that were a recurring theme across the organization. So not just in North America, and I didn't want this to be a North American-centric technology platform. This needed to resonate with folks in 48 countries. So to come out with that survey question, figure out what are the key use cases, deliver on that with effective communication so that the users understood what to expect for round 1.
Let's have one more question before we go to our audience for some questions from you.
Sure. Did you say what some of those, can you talk about some of those 3 use cases for you? Because I think that's really interesting. I love the idea that you've just got to have this purpose. These are the nails. So tell us the use cases. Right.
So some of, getting down to brass tacks, some of the use cases were quite simple. And again, they were universal in 48 countries. So
not NBC Universal, just
Universal.
God.
You're good.
See?
See? Number one.
See how I did that?
Number one, and very simple, was a corporate directory of employees. So how do we have a single repository of employees that's connected to company infrastructure, systems like Active Directory, so pulling in all the employees, provisioning and deprovisioning of accounts, but just knowing who are my coworkers in Palo Alto, in Seattle, in Tokyo, in London. I had, before this platform, we had, again, 48 separate countries where we had presence. A lot, again, through acquisitions. Each of these countries, in effect, had their own version of an intranet platform. Once we were able to migrate that all onto a single directory, then I could roll out a platform that was connected to this system, one single corporate directory, so you could find anyone, anywhere with any expertise. So that was number one. Sorry, do you want to continue?
Oh, yeah, no, go ahead.
I want to hear
Number 2, corporate communications platform. Again, we had 48 countries. Every one of those countries had their own communications tool, whether it was email or some other system of record. This was going to be the single source for company news, both internal and external. So number 3 was similar to that, a knowledge base for HR, documents, repository for information, policies, benefits information, and so forth and so on. So again, These were all on disconnected systems. Now everything is under one single technology platform.
What'd you take out of those 3 use cases?
What did I take?
Yeah.
They sound, I think actually, it's the funny thing is they sound really familiar, right? I mean, those are use cases that I bet everybody in this room can relate to, that whether it's the corporate directory, that's one of the things that come, what you don't get to have the advantage of is that I bet you everybody else in here who has people in the single location, the most popular part of the intranet is the lunch menu for the cafeteria that day. So you don't get the advantage of that. But these sound, I think that, even in a kind of new, up and coming, but globally distributed workforce like you have, these use cases really resonate. I think that's the thing that I take home.
All right, let's go to our audience. If you have questions, raise your hand. We have our experts up here, Andrew Michaloff, Lou Dubois, and Celine Schillinger. Who's got a question? Raise your hand, and Elise will come over to you. So I'm right over here, Elise. Let's start right here. Please stand up, say your name, speak loud, and your company, and your question, and who's it directed to.
I want to get in on the selfies, by the
There
way.
was a selfie on the stage.
Tierney from Capital One. Question for Celine. I love the idea of the corporate rebel and small scale under the radar work without explicit executive buy-in. What's the biggest thing you've ever done that pushed the limits of under the radar without explicit executive buy-in work in social media?
Okay, so for our viewing audience, if you couldn't hear, it's Christine Tierney, right, from Capital One. Thank you very much. What's the biggest thing? Say it again, please.
The biggest thing that you've done that's pushed the limits of that under the radar experimentation
Okay.
without explicit executive buy-in.
Yeah, what's the biggest thing you've ever done that's pushed the limits without executive
Tell us
buy-in?
about your rebellion, in other words.
I've done a little bit too many. I will tell you about the first one, maybe. I got to a point where I was a bit pissed off by the lack of diversity in the company, and I thought it was a loss for the company to use only a very small fraction of its talents. And I launched a movement for gender balance at work. And I actually sent an email to the CEO. That was my first act of rebellion. And, but I didn't expect anything big from that, but this email became viral and started and was the first point, the starter, the beginning of a movement that extended to the whole company across 50 countries, and that set the company in motion, and we became like a very, very big movement. And a lot of us got to use the social tools for the first time because we had a purpose and we wanted to deliver something, to build value together, and social tools were the obvious answer. So men and women contributing together to building a better, more modern, more diverse company. And that's where everything started for me in terms of my change journey.
Celine, I think that's a great example, but I wonder if it also isn't the biggest nightmare, I think, of sometimes of a corporate organization and the pushback that you see when they kind of allow social into their enterprise, as if they have a choice, by the way, but where they have a sanctioned social place, is that the water cooler is that much more expansive now, and you can get these kind of challenges to status quo in that way. How do you, and I guess I'll open this up to the others on the panel as well, is have you felt that as a pushback, as a kind of worry by the organization, and how do you kind of make the case, but how do you make the case for this kind of, even in spite of that?
I can take that. I mean, I think that, there will certainly be, a bit of worry around social, right? There always has been, especially from a corporate perspective, that it's not a controlled message, right? And this is a big change for a lot of the way that we operate. I think that the thing that happened, a few years ago, where I think it hit a lot of executives that there is no controlling this, right? And so we either need to adopt with it or become irrelevant. Mm-hmm. And so this is where I think, particularly when you look at, I think her example is a great one, where you use kind of empowerment of employees and using the right people to actually get something done can actually change the mindset of that executive who may be not so willing to buy into that social mindset. This is happening both on the internal side and the external side, right? I mean, this is why, and I used to work in the news world, and so, it's why the newsrooms have been completely disrupted by, real-time information flowing. You guys talked about Facebook and everything like that earlier. It's completely shifted in the last 4 or 5 years, so.
Gone are the days you held that story until 10 o'clock. Trust me.
And I, to add to that as well, I mean, if employees aren't doing it on your internal platform, they're doing it on Facebook. If they're not doing it on internal, they're doing it on YouTube. They're doing it on Twitter or Pinterest. They're doing it somewhere else.
Yeah.
Give them a platform to do it. It's safe. It's within the confines of the corporate infrastructure, and it can be moderated.
Yep. And you can get something good out of it.
All right, a couple more questions. Let's go right here. Elise, name, company?
Yeah, my name is Ken Barnett, and I'm with Disney.
Ken Barnett with Disney. Great. What's your question and for who?
My question is for all three panelists, and it's simply, what is the biggest challenge that you're currently facing with your intranet today?
Wow. What is your biggest challenge? Let's start with you, Andrew, that you're currently facing with your intranet today?
Right. So our biggest challenge has been, from the beginning, is getting more executive buy-in. We've had a lot of ground-up adoption and use of the platform. Executives are buying in because that's where everyone is and that's where everyone is communicating. But getting them to be more active participants, which really will help me to fulfill my overall vision for this tool, which is an employee engagement tool enabling folks within the organization to feel closely connected with leadership, understand the vision of leadership, and help them to drive their vision to success of the company. So getting leadership more involved, whether it's just daily blogging, producing video content, giving them a name and a face, and letting people see them in 2 dimensions, at least. So again, being so globally distributed, opening up that line of communication to executives has been something that we're really heavily focused on at this point.
So Lou Dubois, NBC Universal, what's the biggest challenge you're facing with your intranet?
Yeah, it's a problem. It's a challenge that I think I'm actually surprised we haven't talked more about today. Is mobility and access to intranet on all devices. So, in my eyes, if it doesn't work on mobile, it doesn't work. I think that when you think about intranet platforms, that often has not been the case. You look at the way that people design a lot of systems now, and they're very much designed for the desktop user. I talked a little bit earlier about the different kind of user and employee base that we have, and if we want to reach anybody, then we need to get where they are on whatever platform they are, wherever they are, and whenever they are. So,
And
mobility.
Celine Schillinger, you're...
I so much agree with that. Mobility is such a big challenge, and currently what I see is something that's heavy, that's not social, not interactive, that's not mobile. It's not engaging. It's not very interesting.
Okay.
Interesting.
Can I add one more thing to that too, actually?
No.
Okay.
Yes, please.
I think search too. We talked about this a little bit earlier today, but I think that forever intranets have kind of just been deep troves of information that are very rarely curated. I think that as people and companies get smarter, they're figuring out better ways to kind of, especially again on mobile devices too, raise search rank and using the different algorithms that Google and others have provided. So.
I want to ask a question, maybe this is probably the final question, about metrics. Lou, you said earlier something that I said I was going to dig into a little bit later because I want to disagree with you. You said that you look at the kind of numbers of visits to the site, number of visits to mobile. I think there's a lot of ways to go and get visits, right? We could go post pictures of cats and that would get visits. You could go do a lot of things to get visits. I wonder if I can't challenge you to give me better metrics and you others up here to kind of, for example, Andrew named a couple of use cases that you really wanted to kind of go out and conquer, and you guys have set some pretty high marks for what you want to be able to do. How are you showing executives that you're starting to hit the mark?
A quick disclaimer in the show, this is the point in CMS-Connected where Scott expertly slips in. You can get all the analytics you want. However, what you need is analysis of those analytics from a firm like Digital Clarity Group that can transform you into the digital
Come
process.
on, dude.
That was sweet by you.
Come
so
on,
answer the question
dude.
any way you would like. Nice job. That
Yeah,
was good.
thanks a lot. Whatever.
So an analytics question from an analytics guy, shocking. I think that you're 100% right. I mean, I think that the numbers don't make sense unless you make sense of them. And so, I think that we look at page views and unique visitors and time spent on site. Video views, video starts, video ends. I think that all of the numbers do matter. I think that it's ultimately though what you end up doing with that. And for us, we do a lot of different things from a global communications perspective within our company. I think that you look at the numbers and the numbers will only tell you a certain part. of the story. You need to actually go out and talk to people. So we actually do a lot of that, with employee focus groups. We do it with an employee survey every year. We learn information beyond just that kind of the basic numbers, and I think that to me, yes, it's an analytics question because that's going to be the easiest way to tell the story, but beyond that, it's a people question.
Good stuff.
All right, let's take one more audience question if you have one. Let's go back over here. You're watching CMS Connected. We are coming to you from the Hotel Marlowe in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and it is from the Intranet Reloaded event in 2015. Your name, your company?
Hi, Maureen Godfrey and Cable Wireless.
Maureen Godfrey from where? Maureen, I'm sorry.
No problem. Cable Wireless Communications.
Okay, and your question?
In Caribbean and Latin America. And culture plays a big role in the success of any platform. But I'm coming from a company that you have multiple brands and multiple cultures, and some of them have their own internet that has existed for many years. And now we're trying to build one single platform, one community for everyone. What do you believe is the best approach or the best starting point in designing and building out that community?
So the question is about multiple cultures and the best approach to building one single platform that's a solution, correct? Who wants to tackle that one?
So I could start. I have something to add. I mean, we've had some challenges as well around global adoption. So we have 48 countries. We have tons of different cultures that are now utilizing this platform. I think that one of the first things that I did was to reach out to constituents who could help me as early adopters in every region of the world. So I started off in Latin America, in APAC, in EMEA. Identified the folks with whom I would be working to build a community of experts, build my early adopters, and help me drive this thing to success. So we started off with a pilot launch in 3 countries. We quickly iterated, so we've been constantly launch and evolve, launch and evolve, launch and evolve. So learning techniques from the experts, having them share their expertise in groups within our community, sharing the knowledge, helping me to effectively duplicate my efforts across all countries. And it's always getting back to some of the basics, like what are our basic core use cases? It's around, again, directory, HR, and the number one key thing is content. So high quality content that is hyper-local, that is relevant and what matters to the user. Not global content that they don't really care about, but hyper-local and regional content that matters to those people. And not just standard blogs and discussions, but the most compelling form of content is video. So we've incorporated a lot of video into the solution. So providing these core tools that help address the needs of the entire organization, not just focusing on, again, North America. We're a North American company. We were founded in North America, but we're a global company. Now we're in 47 countries.
All right, for the sake, very good.
So yeah, so that's been our technique, is to engage users and identify your experts community around the globe that can help you drive your vision and help you duplicate your effort in every region.
Helpful, Maureen? Okay, let's finish up with a quick comment from all 3 of you on the subject of this particular episode of CMS Connected, the process of transforming your social intranet. Sort of a takeaway for everybody in this room, for everybody that's watching. What's the one thing you want to leave them with, 25, 30 seconds or less? We've heard a lot about mobility, about search, about getting buy-in from the top, about joining the corporate rebels. I still want to know where you meet once a month. But
Twitter.
Let's start with you, Celine. What's the one thing you want to have as a takeaway?
The one thing is something that was inspired to me by John Hagel, a recent conference. He said, if you think that change is a rational process, that you need to gather all the right data, do the right analysis, and present it to the right people, you've already lost. It's not a rational process. It's a political process.
Great. Lou Dubois?
I would say that we can sit up here and talk, in very generic terms about our company. I think you need to figure out what works for you and your culture and your people. I think that everywhere is different, and so my biggest thing would be, take all the points that we've talked about, but then apply it to your people and to your businesses.
And Andrew?
I'd say that, actually two things. So one is, is to continue to partner with the right people, both internally and externally. So you have your adopters and you have the right solution partners. That's number one. Number two is to create your vision early, but keep it high level enough that you can remain strategic and continue to evolve as the needs of the organization change.
Andrew Michaloff, Lou Dubois, Celine Schillinger, thank you very much. How about a nice round of applause? All right, one more quick break on CMS Connected, and we'll be back to wrap up this edition on location at the Hotel Marlowe at the Intranet Reloaded event 2015.